Hey, hi, welcome. Let me turn the music down here and yeah, we can get started. Thank you for those of you that have tuned in and those of you that are going to be joining us. And if you're catching this at a later day, hey, thanks. Glad you're here. Before I move on too far, let's just quickly just go over the chat rules just to refresh everything. I like it when people participate, and if you hop into the chat or even leave a comment after the video and watch it as a video on demand later, please introduce yourself. Let us know who you are. The whole idea behind this is forming a community more than anything else, and a community where we can collaborate, cooperate, share information, etc. So your introductions, where you're from, who you are, what you do, are appreciated. Now, the other thing is, if I don't answer or you have an opinion that's different than mine, by all means, you throw it into the chat or in the comments. Your knowledge, your opinions count, your experience counts for something. In my books, anyway. Be civil. Do me a favor, no name calling, no insults. We didn't come out of the womb knowing health and safety and being absolutely experienced at every single thing we do. We don't. So please, no name calling, no insults, just collaborate and contribute. And one other thing, this is discussion. It's not considered professional advice. As I say to everybody, unless there's a contract signed and money promised, this is just collaboration and discussion. This is not professional advice. Yeah, so, yeah, we can get started and get into it. Couple of things. This weekend this last couple of weeks has been tough on the world. Of course, the usual stuff going on in Eastern Europe that's in the news. Not going to comment either way because it's as, how should we say, dividing as the plague. And then the other thing, of course, along with the British Empire and the rest of the world, there was a mourning of the loss of one of the longest reigning, in fact, the longest reigning monarch in British history, and for that matter, in history. Queen Elizabeth II, mourned by her family, her peers, world leaders, and the world. It was, in fact, the most watched ceremony or most watched event in all of history on TV. And in Canada, well, what can I say? We sent this idiot, our village idiot. Enough of that. Yeah. Of all the things that we could have done as a country, as a nation, yeah, I have no words. What can I say? But something else that is of note that happened just recently too, and something I want to address, is the fact that WorkSafe BC has imposed the record high single penalty, almost like we're working up to $1 million here, $710,000 for asbestos violations. And there's a few things that are sickening about this. Number one is there are very few organizations and corporations in North America, or even on this planet for that matter, that don't understand the dangers of asbestos. But even worse is this company is GFL Environmental. And so this is an environmental company that should know. And they failed to provide workers with personal protective equipment when conducting asbestos work. And this what happened in British Columbia, of course, so WorkSafe BC. And WorkSafe BC inspected and found that there was workers that were working on site and like an equipment operator working inside, and he exited the excavator with no PPE. And realistically, this is a bad thing. I can't say how much it is, but let's look at some just quick stats here, and this may boggle your mind, it may not. But of the 161 work-related deaths, so that's 161 too many, in 2021, 99 deaths were related to occupational disease. Asbestos exposure was a contributing factor in 53 work-related deaths in 2021. So over half of the occupational disease claims in British Columbia involved asbestos. And yet here we are still, and this is like 2022. This is not as though this is brand new or new science, emerging technology, anything else like that. And we are still having employers putting employees, workers, at risk in an environment. And regardless if the worker chose to say, it's just no big deal or whatever, that doesn't matter. The employer still has a duty of care to ensure that if that worker's not going to obey or the rules or comply with the safeguards that the employer's put in place, the employer is duty bound to remove them. That's how it works. And so this sort of stuff can't go on. It just can't. Now, today's live stream is, I thought I would do something different. It's just going to be strictly talking head, no slides, no media stuff, nothing else like that, just talking head stuff. And because I've had a few emails, a few communications, a few messages regarding interview questions. And you know what? It runs the whole gamut. There's good, bad, otherwise. And so I thought what I'd do is just have a question and answer talk, and you can leave comments and I'll try to answer them after the video. If you hop into the chat, I will do the best I can. But I thought I'd go over some of the ones that I've encountered in my time, or as a manager looking for workers, some of the questions that I've asked. And some of them run the gamut of preposterous all the way up to actually very useful. So a couple of things first off. Recruiters are polarized. Some approach an interview as a method of understanding and selecting. Others approach an interview with a methodology still of understanding, but eliminating. So, you know what? It's very hard to gauge. You can try as you might from the questions and the body language, but it's very difficult. So always walk in with the notion of you have to sell yourself and why they should be taking you on as an employee, as a worker, and what you can bring to the table. It's a very hard road. Interviews are terrible. I find them when I've been interviewed, nerve-wracking a little bit. I don't get test anxiety or anything. I just figure I'm either going to make it or not. But also as the person on the other side of the table doing the interviewing, I have found it's, in some cases, very exhausting, some cases exhilarating. Either way, it's an interesting experience. So a couple of things when you're headed in there. Number one, you're going to be given a bottle of water, likely. A lot of interviewers do that. And don't spend your time bottle feeding on it, okay? Take a little sip if you have to, if your throat's getting clogged or whatever, but don't treat it like a baby bottle and suck on it on a constant basis. On that note, I've been talking for a while. One of the other things that does occur too is people try to take a drink out of it and their mouth's still half full when they start talking. Don't do that. Now, the other thing about an interview is be genuine, okay? No matter what, we all read body language to a certain extent. Some people are very, very good at interpreting it. Others, it just causes an instinctual reaction in them, like something about that guy. So be genuine, no matter what. The other thing is a lot of questions, especially the eliminating ones, are meant to elicit a negative response a lot of times. Now, I know there's likely recruiters who are going to view this video afterwards and just murder me in the comments. Once again, a lot of this is from personal experience, personal observation, and working with recruiters. So your biggest job is to take that negative response and turn it into a positive wherever possible. The other final thing is, I know that, or two final things, I know that this is easier said than done, but make an effort to relax, okay? And then you don't have to answer a question right away. You don't, not at all. You can take a deep breath, stop and think, just remember to get started again, and then paraphrase the question back and provide an answer. And it's good. There's a lot of, and some of these questions that I'm going to go over are boilerplated and they just have different formats. So you can take a lot of this with you. So number one, and it always starts this way, is tell us about you. Now, I've made mistakes in the past, and I've started off, well, I'm a grandfather, I've got 8 grandkids, and I was widowed, now engaged to a lovely lady, and I start with that. And you know what? Realistically, that's all kind of heartwarming and beautiful and nice and tender. It's a hallmark moment, but that's not what they're interested in. So what you need to do is try to do this in 45 seconds to a minute, but paraphrase and give the Coles Notes version of your resume from the bottom, the furthest out, the most, all the way up to the most recent. So your earliest experiences all the way up to your most recent. And so it might be, well, about myself, what I want to do is just point to my resume. In my early adult life, I was a logger, and that's where I got immersed into health and safety. I became a first aid attendant, and as a result, the ad hoc first aid, or the ad hoc safety guy. And then as it had a natural progression, I pretty soon was teaching first aid. Then that progressed to health and safety. I did contract work, ended up being gainfully employed through a few different organizations as a health and safety professional. And that's brought me to where I am today, where I'm a Canadian registered safety professional, a Canadian risk manager, and I now have broadened my spectrum to where I think I can provide you in this position a lot of that experience and expertise, and I bring that to the table that I think I can lend to it. And what I saw in the job posting that really intrigued me is that you also want to focus on training and presentation. So in the last 5 years, I've done a lot of it. I've done over 100 presentations on health and safety, and I really enjoy it. And you know what? There can be lots of different variations of that. But what you want to do is take 45 seconds to a minute to go from your past experiences all the way up to your most recent one, and culminating in what brings you to the table more than anything else. And what they would find you as attractive. Now, and I'm sorry, I'm getting this high-pitched squealing from somewhere. I don't know where, but I hope it isn't interrupting the stream too bad. Now, one of the questions really drives me nuts. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And you know what? You're going to think to yourself, oh, God, that's stupid. I just want a job. Or hopefully you're not going to fire me before 5 years are up, or anything else that's running through your head. And I don't know why recruiters or managers ask this. The only thing I can say, and some of the research I've done, is they want to see what makes you tick. Are you just the kind of person that says, hey, I enjoy treading water for a paycheck? As long as I can show up for work and coast through and go home at the end of the day and still get a paycheck, I'm fine. So what you need to do is, once again, turn that negative into a positive. And it would be that I'm hoping, and from what I've seen in the small amount of research that I've been able to do and glean from your organization, is you're your organization is one where there's potential growth. So I do hope that I can start out working in the position I am, but there's room for growth, even if it is taking on more responsibility and more intriguing and interesting projects, with the hope of moving through the organization. And whether it's still at this position now in 5 years, but one where I've accomplished lots, met challenges, overcome them, and been able to add to my experience. You don't want to look like you're just the social climber and you may start off as an advisor and you want to be the director in 5 years. A great idea, but maybe not realistic. The idea is what you can positively bring to the organization in that aspect. So that's kind of where I head with it all the time, is where do you see yourself in 5 years? And even when I went on interviews during the plague and things weren't happening, and all you really were thinking in the back of your head is, I want a job, I want a job, I want a job, I want to eat, I want to eat, I want to keep a roof over my head. You still have to answer it with that positive connotation. So once again, depending on the growth and opportunities in your organization, even if I'm at the same level, I want the opportunity. I'm hoping I have the opportunity to take on challenging projects and work through them and add to my experience level and contribute to the organization. If there's room for upward mobility, by all means, I want to take advantage of that. However, the biggest thing is, what can I contribute and what can I add to my experience level through it? I find those are some of the best answers to me. Now, the other one, and it kind of drives me around the bend, is, what is your greatest weakness? And although you would like to say things like, well, that's a dumbass question, once again, it's one of those elimination questions. And I've heard some smart-ass answers, really. Well, my greatest weakness is I don't know my weaknesses. Or my greatest weakness is I capitalize on my strengths. And honestly, they really don't work. Okay? So what you might want to say is, once again, turn that negative into a positive. So, well, one of my greatest weaknesses, and one that I see that I struggled with earlier on, but I think I've overcome quite well, is when I take on a project or I take on a responsibility, especially with a team, is I devote a lot of energy to it. I bring a lot of energy to the table. And sometimes some people can find that off-putting, or the fact that I'm done my stuff and I want to help other people, and they find it overshadowing and off-putting. But I found, if I communicate my actual true intentions of just wanting to see this project and us as a team having success and completing this project successfully, under budget and on time or early if possible, and if I can communicate that to my team or the team I'm working with in an effective way, I find that helps me to overcome that weakness. And you know what? I've found that that's quite helpful. It's worked for me in the past, and people have said, oh, good answer. So I'm assuming that they're being genuine and it is a good answer. Now, I've heard a gamut of positive ones. I bring a lot of energy to the table, and I find if I communicate, or my greatest weakness is I'm just too loyal and things like that. I'll leave that with you. I found the answer that I gave is about the best, but what I would do, and honestly, I didn't think of it. I heard it and I thought, I'm going to use that from now on. I'll leave that with you, but always one thing, take that negative, turn it to a positive. Now, the other one is almost like passive aggression. And that's the opposite. What is your greatest strength? And you want to make sure that you're not showing through with arrogance and overconfidence. So what you might want to say is something to the tune of, well, I think my greatest strength is being able to empathize with the moment. And what I mean by that is when I come into a room and we're having a discussion, I like to think that my greatest strength is I can read the room and read the table and read the people with it and respond accordingly so that we can meet the goal that we need to meet. not looking at the fact of who's right, who's wrong, but it's okay to lose a battle to win the war. And sometimes you may have to, with that last saying, you may have to ask, does that seem simple? Do you understand what I mean with that? And you might have to share an example. Like, for instance, I can remember when I had a lot of conflict with the union shop stewards quite some time ago in an early occupation that I was in. And no matter what, I could not. I did a terms of reference up for the Health and Safety Committee. I was the Health and Safety Advisor, did a terms of reference up. Immediately, it was grieved by the shop steward. And so, fine, instead of fighting about it, I just said, why don't you take it and go ahead and use it, revise it, do whatever you want. But these are some of the good, what I see as good points that would enable us as a health and safety committee to meet and comply with the legislation. And so that person took the material back, reordered it, changed the font and changed the formatting a bit, still the same material. Nothing really changed. And my boss came to me and he said, so was that a blow to your pride? I said, no. Lost the battle, won the war, so don't care. So that's your greatest strength, understanding and empathizing with the room and the people. And so those are what I found is my successes for those ones. And I found those three questions: where do you see yourself in 5 years? What's your greatest weakness? What's your greatest strength? I found them difficult questions, but a lot of times recruiters will ask them, or managers will ask them, as a process for elimination. A negative response will end up likely with elimination. Turn it into a positive and you might still be in the running. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, the secret is if just a few questions, the interview is over. Not necessarily. I've seen people just, managers ask 2 questions and that's all they want to talk about. And the recruiters try to fill the air with some other questions because the manager's already formed the picture, made their decision. I can't tell you. The only thing I can tell you that if you're leaving with a positive feeling, it might be worth your while to not lose hope. Now, the other one I find is actually very fascinating, and it takes a bit of preparation to answer, is why us? Why Acme Corp, or why Provoking Safety, or whatever the case may be? When they ask, and I'm hoping you had the wherewithal, that you would do a bit of research. I can remember I went to work for an organization, and it was, of all the ones that I had applied for and looked for, they were one that had health and safety as part of their strategic plan. They had it as part of their mission, vision, and values. And they had it when you read the strategic plan and going through it. And so the person who would become my boss, he said, so why us? And I said, that's a really good question. And I answered, I was truthful. I said I had a few criteria for who I wanted to apply for, and it had to be in a larger center, hopefully warmer. I was way up in northern BC, and larger with more responsibilities to the position. I said, but what added the icing on the cake, if you will, or put your organization over the top, is I said, of all the ones that I've looked at and wanted to be a part of, you had health and safety as part of your mission, vision, and values and part of your strategic plan. And he looked at me, he says, you read our strategic plan? I said, yeah, it was on your website. And I was doing research. And he goes, okay, so tell us about it. And so you better be prepared. You better have done your homework and so you can speak to it and not just say, oh God, they've asked me more. And I did. I spoke to it and I just said, yeah, here's a few of the things that I noticed about it. And I mentioned, and I don't want to talk too much about and give everything away, but I did talk about what I saw as valuable within the strategic plan as far as health and safety goes, and looking at it. And I said, one of the biggest things is your organization talked about it, making it part of the day-to-day operations and part of your functions. And I said, a lot of times people just look at safety as a checkbox, a thing, something that's good for a slogan or whatever. I said, your strategic plan spoke to it with a level of sincerity, and that spoke to me. And I don't know if that was one of the tipping points. I'm not sure. But I ended up getting the job. Now, drink a coffee here. I like the questions that delve into your experience. And once again, always use your resume as your guide. I should hope that you would know your resume off by heart. I honestly do. Because if you go in and go, well, hold on, I have to look at my resume. Oh, please. And I've had that, honestly. Or I've had a person bring a book in and a binder and flip through tabs about themselves. And seriously, you should be able to speak from memory and from your heart. Once again, being disingenuous, people will read that. Maybe they can't tell the body language perfect like some psychologist, but it'll likely start setting up alarm bells in their head. So you're going to get a question. Tell us about a project. And they may just say, tell us about a project. You can start talking about it, and then they'll interject with questions. Usually the questions will be centered around, what was the budget? And did you come in under budget? That's a big one, of course. What were some of the challenges? How did you overcome those challenges? And one of the biggest ones is, how did you measure success? And so one I like to share about is I went to work for an organization shortly after the mass shooting in Virginia Tech. So emergency response and emergency management, although it was down here on the job posting, instantly became up here. It did. It was just right to the top. And so one of the things that I was, how should I say, trying to promote and lobbying for was some sort of an emergency response system and an early warning system where all of the different buildings and facilities could get notified if something occurred. And I was working for a post-secondary institution. And, you know, for 5 long years, I really tried. And I just happened to, everything worked together that we could get the government funding and some additional funding, and was able to find a contractor, and everything worked out perfectly. So I said, well, did a project. It was about $200K. And this is what it was to get these devices, the software system, and the whole process up, but also the administrative control, the training and instruction for members of the public, staff, contractors, workers, etc., to be able to respond when these things occurred. So part of not only ensuring that contractors stayed on track and the project stayed on track as far as time constraints goes, because we only had 6 months to get this done over 21 facilities, 180,000 square kilometers. And so it was a lot. It took a lot. And so trying to measure, and we did have pitfalls, like all of a sudden, oh, we can't core through that wall, or, well, we could core through that wall, but it's going to cause interference with this transmission, that transmission, etc. And so those physical challenges also had trying to work around classes being conducted and so forth with hammer drills and all of that. So there was all of those physical challenges, the budgetary challenges, but then afterwards, how were we going to train everybody? And having a bit of money left over and able to make a video to provide instruction, put it up on our local website, etc. All of this worked together. And then, of course, through this, I'll stop here, you may start getting questions. So what were some of the budgetary challenges? And so I had to share about that. One of the things that we did encounter was, yes, we calculated overtime for the contractors, etc., but there were situations where staff was being put out in some way, shape, or form, or was having to work around the contractor and incurring overtime. So how are we going to deal with that and so forth? And so through negotiation and looking at opening up emptier rooms and dealing with our own facilities budget, we were able to transfer and move rooms around so the work could continue with zero impact on the budget. There was a lot of maneuvering and a lot of extra work on my behalf, but we were able to do it. So you may get questions like that. And then, of course, the last one is, how did you measure success? And of course, you're going to have, number one is coming in under budget. That's a measurement for success all the time in any project. Number two is the time constraints. Did you work it out within your time constraints? And fortunately, I was under budget, actually by $10,000. I did arrive in time 2 weeks early. And how did I measure success? Did drills at the different facilities, engaged community policing officers in each one of the towns and cities, and was able to do everything and execute the drills with people sheltering in place as a response to the alerts. And so I think it was a success all around. And if I was to go forward as a success, the organization 8 years later is still, or 10 years later, is actually still using all of those steps and processes that were put in place, and they're still working today. So that may or may not win you accolades. That's just the process that I use. And I've found the feedback I've got from recruiters or potential employers is it worked. Now, the other one you're going to get is, how do you work with a cross-section of a team, whether it be an interdisciplinary team, or how do you work with a team of different types of professionals? Now, fortunately for me, I've worked with engineers and lawyers on things. I've worked with nurses and other healthcare professionals. I've worked with other safety professionals. I've worked in construction projects. So what you need to do is, you're always going to get asked about your working dynamics. And that's one that can pivot either way. It can turn negative really quick or maintain a good positivity to it. So one of the things that I always suggest is pick a good one, but pick a good one where there was challenges, interpersonal challenges, what you had to do to overcome them, and how you contributed to the team to meet their success markers, being under budget, being under time, and bringing the project to fruition, and being able to meet those key performance indicators. And that's my example. So like, I'll share one. I'll try to be as ambiguous as possible, but working with an interdisciplinary team in a healthcare setting, having to rewrite a policy on bloodborne pathogens with nurses and clinicians, but also in a scale that would also meet the rest of the organization, such as custodial staff and facilities workers, etc., where they may encounter that stuff. And so it was pretty important, even like first aid attendants, etc. So we would meet, and we met at a scheduled time, and we would, first off, what we did is we outlined all our needs cross-organizational. And I was the health and safety lead, and there was a nursing lead, etc. And we decided early on that we would take minutes, we would record everything. We had our calendar, so we figured out what the needs were. And what we did is, with each need, we figured out an action plan and who that would be assigned to, and what the deliverable date would be, the expected deliverable date. But also interspersed in there was the reporting days on progress each time we meet. And if there was an ability, if either one of us had capacity to help out the other, etc. And that's how we carried the whole process through. Now, there were times when my priority felt to me greater than somebody else's, and we had to talk and get it out of the table and discuss it. Fortunately for me, we had a good functioning team, and we had a good level of trust, and we were able to have that healthy conflict, because healthy conflict is necessary. And how do you tell a high functioning team? It's not necessarily by their personalities, but it's what's the end goal as well. And so you may have a mediocre team, but you have a very lofty end goal. You have to rise to that high functioning capability. And I've always shared this, and I've shared this with recruiters and managers, etc. I said, I always look at the 3 pillars of a high functioning team, whether they're present or you have to create them, is number 1, there has to be a level of professional trust. Number 2 is there has to be a welcome atmosphere for healthy conflict. And number 3 is there has to be an appreciation for diversity. In other words, we all have different personalities, different backgrounds, different histories, and we have to appreciate that and understand that that person is going to come at something with a different perspective and angle that you are. And that's been my answer. And so, no questions yet. So, okay, well, carry on. And if any one of you has, well, this is an interview question that I've had, how would you answer it, Kevin? Just go ahead, pop it in the chat, by all means. If you pop it in the comments after the video's done, chances are what I'll likely do is maybe make some follow-up videos on them, etc. Now, another one, especially if you're working as a safety professional, is tell us about correcting unsafe acts. And what they're looking for here, and I did too when I asked the question, is I wanted to make sure that that person isn't a safety Nazi. Okay? They don't just yell, "Get down off that ladder. What are you, stupid?" And smarten up. Put that ladder down. Go get a proper ladder. Delineate this area, etc. Blah, blah, blah. And unfortunately, I've seen a lot of people get like that when health and safety, and they likely have really good intentions. But you know what? Sometimes you have to put away the stick. Most of the time, you have to put away the stick and try the carrot first. Okay? More carrot than stick. More honey than vinegar. So one of the questions I like to ask too, because a lot of public organizations will have a high contractor element in it for a lot of different reasons, and I won't go into them, but there's a lot of times there's contractors working there. And so I usually have always asked a question myself like this. I've been asked similar ones, but you're going from one meeting to another and you happen to see a contractor who is standing on the top step of a stepladder and they're working inside a suspended ceiling with only one tile removed, so they can't see their feet or anything below them. How do you deal with this? And I've had everything run the gamut from I would tell them to get the hell down off that ladder and to smarten up, and I'm going to write them up, and they'll be lucky if they ever work here ever again. Yeah, awesome. Working really well, and hopefully you don't get punched out. Or I've had some really good answers, and the ones that I appreciate run sort of like this. I would just say, "Hey, excuse me, you up on the ladder, don't panic. I want you to do me a favor. If you can, please come down, and I want to talk to you about a few things." And I've had myself personally, F off, who are you, who do you think you are, etc. And I just answer depending on my level, like, hey, my name's Kevin. I'm the health and safety consultant here. I'm the health and safety advisor. I'm the health and safety manager, whatever the case may be. I try to avoid using the term officer. Has kind of a forceful connotation to it. I usually just use my job title. And so I just appreciate just a few minutes of your time. Just come on down, let's talk, okay? And I've never had anybody refuse after I've had that passive reproach. And when they get down, I'll say, look, you were using that top step, and here it says it written on the ladder quite clearly, do not use as a step. You're a tradesman. I'm assuming you're a tradesman, or I'm assuming you're very experienced to this, and it's quite well known top steps of a stepladder shouldn't be used. So what I need you to do is please go get a ladder that's high enough for the work and remove enough tiling so that you can see down and see the floor and see your whole area around you where you're working. If you have to, remove some extra T-bars, etc. But I need to see you working safely. And keep in mind, I'm going to actually have to make a report on this, because the whole idea is we want to look at prevention and the prevention of unsafe acts. I'm not looking to penalize you or anything, but I'm still going to report this. Because they need to know, the organization needs to know from you that you have a level of ethics, you have the ability to be diplomatic, you have the ability to problem solve and problem solve under pressure. And so you're going to have to, and now if you haven't got any experience about correcting unsafe acts, whatever it be, okay, hey, I'll answer that in just a second, okay? Baggio, did I pronounce that correctly? I will answer that one in just a second. But the organization needs to see that you have the ability to do that. Now, if you've never done this before, then what you're going to have to do is either deal with something that's very similar in your experience level, say you've worked in security and you've had to address something, or you've worked in correcting a fellow coworker who's doing something, or whatever the case may be. And worst case scenario, but you still need to answer, don't ever say, well, I've never had to do it. Then what you're going to have to do is say, you know what, I've really never run across this situation before, but here's how I would approach it. And use that same thing. Introduce yourself, ask the person to be able to talk to them, point out what they've done wrong, point out how it goes against your health and safety management system, what the solution is, and then let them know that you're going to have to record this because the organization wants to see that you have ethics and that no matter what, your integrity and your ethics are not going to be compromised. Okay, and that's how I'd answer that one. Now, the question got asked, how do you deal with workers' behavioral errors? I had this question in a recent interview. And awesome question. And usually what I do is when an employer asks me that question, it's much the same thing. You have to confirm understanding. And I've always maintained that if you want proper behaviors, then those proper behaviors have to be spelled out within your occupational health and safety management system, whether it be in the safe work procedures, whether it be in your list of safe work practices, however you've got it, maybe training sessions, awareness, etc., whatever. So if an employer asks me, how do you deal with behavioral errors? Much the same thing. Ask the worker, introduce yourself, ask the worker to stop the work, or you can switch those two around, ask the worker to stop the work, and then introduce yourself and say, I've noticed this, whatever the error is. I've noticed this. Can I ask you why you're doing it this way? Because you want to confirm their understanding, because it's entirely possible that the worker has not received the level of training, or the worker feels that they're going to have to work this way because of extra pressure, whatever the case would be. So number one, confirm where they are. And then say, okay, well, thank you for that, but you're going to have to, and according to our health and safety management system, and this document or that document or this process, I need to see you working like this. So can you please, and then spell out the corrective action. In this case, like I said, get the proper step ladder, whatever the case may be. Because a lot of times, if behavior is committed in error, there's usually only a few root causes for it. Number one is there's nothing within your health and safety management system to describe that desired behavior. Number two is that there is inadequate standards set for the desired behavior. Or number three is it's non-compliance. So if the worker says to you, you know what, I was in a hurry, I didn't have time for all that stuff, then that's non-compliance. And once again, the same thing is I will have to make a note that this incident has occurred. I'll have to make a note that I've corrected you, and I need to see that correct behavior as an observation. And then I'm going to have to report to your manager. Because realistically, if you look at it this way, if we let that behavior go without any visible or probable consequence, then it's likely going to get committed again. Now, Baggio, did that answer your question? Unfortunately, there's a bit of a delay here, and I'm looking down at the chat, so please let me know or clarify by all means. And while I'm waiting for the reply, the other question I get as a manager is, tell us about a situation where you've mentored employees. And it's always a good thing to get clarification. And whether it be mentoring them as working on their professional development, mentoring them as in correcting their behavior or performance management. And so what I'll do is I'll address the first one first, the mentoring and the professional development. And I've worked with a lot of employees, and a lot of times you see potential in them that they don't see in themselves. It's funny. I'm kind of that same way in a bit. I sometimes don't necessarily see my potential until somebody points it out to me. I don't know if it's of lack of self-awareness or whatever, but so I find it, and I've had a lot of times you have to have, when you're mentoring employees, you have to have a discussion with them. You have to understand where they are at this time. Oh, thanks. Glad I answered it, Baggio. Thank you. And did I pronounce your name correctly? Names are important to me, and if I mangled it, I want to know. But back to mentoring is finding out where they are right now, because a lot of times people feel they can't advance because externally to the organization, they have some impediment, whether it be that right now I've got a young family, I really can't take time out to do any courses. Or I'm actually working a second job, or some other thing that's holding them back from doing the external work. So when I've encountered that mentoring employees, what I need to do is understand the time frame. Say, for instance, getting a designation like the one I have as CRSP. It took me quite a while. It took me quite a while to complete my certification program. It took me quite a while to do the studying and being ready for the exam, etc. So understanding right away and letting the employee know that, hey, you know what? How much time, or ask them, how much time, and I found this works for me, how much time do you have that you can spare? If you tell me 0, then you know what? We're just going to put a pin in this and pause it, and we'll talk about it in 3, 6, 9, 12 months. But if they say, you know what? Well, realistically, I got like maybe an hour a night. Okay, well, what can we fit into that hour a night? Or maybe I just have 4 hours on a weekend. What can we fit in? And looking at that and looking at the training that you can accommodate. Also stressing to the employee, because the idea is they're supposed to be there for a while. So you know what? I want to empower you. I want to enable you to do this. So keep in mind, nothing says that a certificate has to be completed in 6 months. Nothing says a certificate has to be completed in 1 year. So whatever time you take to do this, I'm here behind you to support you. If they say that they have, for whatever reason, no wherewithal to do it at all, Baggio. Okay, I will do my best. And once again, apologize for mangling it. But thank you for joining the chat too. So once again, the biggest thing when you're mentoring employees is how do you empower them? How do you work around their external schedule? If it's their internal schedule, you have a bit more control over that. And so you can say, well, let's see what we can do to balance your schedule here. So the whole idea is when you're mentoring an employee with the purpose of advancing their professional development, how can you empower them at work? How can you make sure that you can empower and enable them externally as well? Letting them know that there's no time limit, time constraints. And then also too is no matter what, you can't just say, okay, you're off and running. There has to be a schedule of reporting and understanding their progress, lack of, or where they're stalled and needing some help. Because that's what you're there for. You're there because you have more experience, and that's the whole idea behind mentoring. Now, the other one is can you tell us a case of performance management, good, bad, or otherwise? And the important thing is, like anything else, the moment they start saying bad and otherwise, there's that negativity. You have to turn it around to a positive wherever possible. And I can remember once I worked with an employee who was abrasive, angry, and low functioning, sort of only did what they had to do and the bare minimum wherever possible. In fact, sometimes didn't even rise to the bare minimum. And so what I did is I, number one, sat down the employee and we had a good talk, a heart-to-heart, found out that there was some health issues to deal with. So once again, working around those health issues, empowering them, emergency family assistance program, and all of those things, whether they be within the ability through the healthcare plan, collective agreement, etc., empowering whatever you can do externally, and then focusing on internally as well. And say, and that's where leading from strengths works really well. Understanding what the strengths are and making sure that you can capitalize them, and then wherever possible, work to overcome weaknesses. And one of this person's problems was not being able to show up on time. And so asking them, what's holding you up? What can I do to help? And honestly, they said to me, I cannot get up from my alarm. So giving them suggestions, set 2 alarms, etc. And even to the point where I was giving them wake-up calls. But as soon as I started paying attention to them in a positive manner, it had a turnaround. So whatever you do, like I said, if you're in a management position or you're applying for one and they ask questions regarding performance management, make sure that you always take a negative situation, turn it into a positive. And very much like the mentoring, what's your impediment externally? Let's brainstorm that. What is your impediments internally? Let's brainstorm that. Focus on strengths, capitalize on those, then adjust weaknesses wherever you have to. And I find that process works really good. And honestly, I've had, you know what? Lots of different folks have lots of different answers to it, but those commonalities I find have worked for me. They have. And of course, there's a lot of, whenever you're doing an interview, there's always going to be a lot of scenario-based questions, whether it be, oh, everything's okay, sorry. Whether it be, like I said, tell us about a time where you've had to correct an unsafe act. And then, of course, there's the other ones, like, can you tell us about where you've had to write a safe work document where you've had no experience doing the work? And, I mean, fortunately, I have a wide, vast area of experience, but I have had to do that. And so here is my formula for doing that. And in fact, I've made videos about it. And if you want, what I do is encourage you to go back through and have a look at writing safe work documents. But the formula is pretty easy. And so when I get asked that question, if you wrote a safe work document for something you have no experience for, well, actually, yes, I have. And I've had to write one, and before I did any fall protection training. And so what I've had to do is I've had to write a working at heights and using fall protection anchors on the roof. And so the very first thing I did is I researched the situation. I talked to the workers involved, and I found the most knowledgeable one. And I say, hey, do you want to work with me on this document? And they did. Then I went and I looked at what the industry sector specifics are and what the expectations are in industry. And then, of course, finally, I went and I looked at what's required for compliance. And then working together, understanding that no matter what, you want a desired behavior, then you have to outline all of those standards. Fortunately, I was able to take a fall protection course. I mean, you might not necessarily have that ability to do so, but I took a fall protection course, put on the harness, strapped into an anchor, got familiar with that process. Then, taking the course notes and working with a professional already, we looked at what is our desired behavior. So what are the safe practices that are common to everything with using a fall protection harness, a lanyard, etc. And we made sure that those safe work practices were part of it. And then we had a step-by-step process in place. And then it was a matter of communicating it out to the workers, having them look at it, telling them this is a rough draft. And let's sit down, have a look at it. And if there's any corrections or needed revisions, bring them to the table and we'll have a look at them. And fortunately, I was really lucky because I had a good person to work with. I'd got the information. I'd followed that process. There was no revisions. So once we put it into effect, I got the blessing of the Health and Safety Committee, and we made it part of the Health and Safety Program. Bang, Bob's your uncle. Worked well. And so using that step-by-step process is what I found has always given me success. So I've been able to enter into unfamiliar territory with a bit more of a level of comfort than usual. Because number one, always understanding my areas where I don't have a lot of experience and needing to capitalize on the experience of others. So number one, understanding the professionals that I can work with and elicit some good help and use them as that professional advice. Number two, looking at the industry sector expectations. Number three, what's required for compliance. If you have the opportunity to take courses, great. If not, using that legislation and compliance. Then sit down and looking at what is the desired behavior that's necessary to reach compliance, but practicability. In other words, you can do it. And then write your program considering safe work practices, which are the things that you're normally going to do when you're committing different acts, such as working, you're going to delineate and form a protective area around where you're going to be conducting that work, etc., things like that. Or inspecting you might not put the steps on how to inspect fall protection gear. They might be listed in a safe work practice, and you'll just put inspect gear before donning your harness and attaching your lanyard and attaching to the anchor. And I found that has been success for me. And so I've used, and if you can break things down into basics, then when it comes time and basic formats, when it comes time to answer an interview, you can take and always rely upon those, because guess what? You're going to get asked a question. It's going to be, huh? You're going to draw a blank. But if you have your basic steps into place, then you'll be able to, and understanding and memorizing your resume, then you'll usually be able to recover. And in which case you go, well, just hold on, got to take a drink. Now, just to clarify, you want me to tell you about mentoring an employee through professional development when I was a manager, right? Am I correct in that? Okay, well, let me think back to that. So, take a moment to compose yourself, take a breath, take a drink if you have to, paraphrase the question back, and then launch into it. You don't want to paraphrase the question back and go, yeah, I got nothing. Okay? And like I said, be genuine, be honest, and if you're unsure of something, if you don't know, say so. Okay? And then do your best to say how you would deal with it and how you would do it. You may have to rely upon the classroom lessons you've had, the basics that you've learned, but at least if you have no experience to bring to the table, don't lie. Because I had a person do a PowerPoint demonstration for me as a part of the interview and elimination process. Down to a few candidates, had each one do a PowerPoint demonstration. And wonderful PowerPoint. It was awesome. But then when I asked them to create a PowerPoint on something else, they were stuck. Oh. So if you don't know how to do a PowerPoint and you get somebody else to create it for you and you conduct the presentation during your interview, then go home and figure out how to do it. Because if you get hired as the person, then the last thing you want to do is have your employer find out that you lied your way through your interview. Okay? Yeah. So, where are we? Are there any other questions regarding interview questions, answers? What do we got here for time? Yeah. Okay. So we're approaching an hour. Now we've actually hit the hour. So I don't like to keep anybody very long. So I'll leave a few minutes for questions and answers. If anybody has any general health and safety questions, by all means, pop them into the chat. If not, what you can do is you can always throw out a comment and I will add it to a Q&A, and I usually try, if there's been Q&A or questions come in between the live streams, then what I do is I try to answer them, or depending, if they're really challenging questions, I may even make a video on it. So feel free, pop a question into the chat, or if you're catching this live stream at a later date, by all means, put one into the comments. I enjoy questions as I get them. And I like the ones that stump me and go, you know what? I'm going to have to research that and get back to you. I do, because I learn too. And if you think for an instant that I've mastered everything, I got you fooled, because I don't. And I think health and safety is a constant learning experience made up of continuous improvement, continuous learning, and being a lifelong learner. Health and safety, being a health and safety professional, is about uncovering and discovering problems, looking at them as challenges, rising to the challenge, and solving the problem. Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah. So, doesn't look like I have any other questions, but my goodness, thank you very much. And Baggio, thank you very much for the question. I really appreciated it. And as I said, if anybody else wants to leave a comment, by all means, you just go right ahead. And like anything else, even negative ones, ones where you don't agree with me, I'm fine with that. If you haven't done so yet, click that button and subscribe. If you're trying to enter things into the chat, sorry, I want to have a community, and I want to have a community of collaborators and safety professionals. So that's why I require a subscription for the chat. But you know what? We've reached the end. We haven't had anybody else join in. So, yeah. Do me a favor. Oh, that's kind of bad when I wore this shirt. But anyway, do me a favor. As health and safety professionals, we have to be safety influencers. We have to be safety leaders. So we have to lead by example. And that means wearing our hard hats, wearing our eye protection, using and implementing those safe work practices wherever we are and whatever we do. Okay, so don't just think about safety, don't just talk about it, but provoke safety wherever you are. Okay, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. And if you're catching this on video on demand later on, thanks for joining, and leave me a comment. Okay, take care. Bye for now.